Alright, so if you clicked on this video, I'm gonna assume that you are either a Christian woman trying to figure out what a Christian man wants, or you're a Christian man whose life has been changed by Jesus and you wanna know how you should act towards a Christian woman so that you can pursue someone the way the Lord intends you to pursue them. And so if you're anything like me, you have probably experienced things in the past, relationships in the past that didn't necessarily honor the Lord, or you weren't pursuing that person for the right reason. Listen, you know, in high school, I didn't date anybody until I was a senior, but I never went into dating with the intention of marriage. And not only that, I didn't really go into dating with the thought of the Lord being the center. I dated girls because I thought they were cute and I thought that they were respectful. And although those are some things that kind of go into dating somebody who is a Christian, I didn't have my priorities in line. And so over the years, as I started growing closer to the Lord and started following Him and His Word more and more and more, I started to realize that my priorities in dating, in pursuing a Christian girl, were just completely messed up. And at the end of the day, I didn't really even know what I should have been looking for in a Christian girl, and a girl who I thought was godly and who was going to be my spouse, but instead I looked for other things. And so today, I'm gonna give you guys a list of what Christian guys are actually looking for, and for the guys, what you should be looking for in a Christian girl. So the first thing that Christian guys are looking for, and men that you should be looking for in a Christian woman, is somebody who genuinely loves the Lord and is growing deeper in Him and His Word each and every single day. Now, you know, first off, I want to start off with this. Nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. There's so many areas that I have to improve in, as well as a lot of you guys also probably have to in your own life. But what's really, really important when we look at somebody we should date, or Christian girls, when you're looking for somebody, like what men are looking for, it's gonna be a girl who is genuinely pursuing a relationship with Jesus, and Jesus comes first in their life. And what I mean by that is that they're forming a relationship with the Lord, that they're following and living out His Word, and in turn, that would flow over into a relationship. You know, there's been so many times that I've gotten into relationships, and because the relationship wasn't built on the Lord, or the intentions weren't in the right place, it crumbled and it didn't work out. And thankfully it didn't, because now I'm married to my amazing wife, Julia. But if you don't have your relationship built on the right foundation, which is Jesus, it's gonna crumble. And that there's gonna be cracks, and things are gonna come up and go, and it's just gonna be a painful experience. So the number one thing that Christian men are looking for in a relationship is a girl who is wholeheartedly following Jesus and puts Him first in their life. The second thing that Christian men are going to be looking for in Christian women is a woman who is gonna lead them closer to Jesus. You see, as a Christian man, the person that you date, or the person that you are pursuing, should not be afraid to, number one, push you closer to Jesus and call you out in the areas that, you know, maybe you need to be called out, or maybe you need to think or see differently, but also somebody who's gonna pray for you, who's gonna speak words of life into your life, who's gonna uplift you. You see, the last thing that a Christian man wants is, you know, maybe to come home from a hard day of work, or to be dealing with some stressful life situation, but at the end of the day, doesn't lead them closer to Jesus, but instead tears them down and doesn't go to the Word first. Now, another thing I want to preference, I know the man is supposed to be the leader of the household. And so for the men who are here watching this, I want you to know that this comes also from your intimacy with Jesus and leading this person in the right way. If you're not leading your spouse or the person that you are pursuing in the correct way, which is leading them under God and leading them in a way that they should be led, which is by Jesus and His Word, that's not going to be good for the longevity and the duration of the relationship. And that's also going to cause some foundational issues in a dating relationship, and especially when it comes to marriage. And there's always ways that we can work in that, but a simple way of doing this is making sure that you and your spouse are able to sit down and have quiet time together and read your Word and grow deeper in intimacy with Jesus and with another. Like, that's one simple way that this can be done. So making sure, men, that the women are not only gonna grow you and push you closer to Jesus, but also, men, that you are leading these women under the Lord, and that you are constantly pursuing them in a godly way and keeping Christ first at the center of your relationship, because you're called to be a leader. The third thing that I feel like is a stereotype in Christian dating that Christian men are gonna look for in Christian women is that they resemble Proverbs 31 principles. And if in case you didn't know what this says, I'm gonna list off a couple. Number one is devotion, that they're first and foremost devoted to God above all else. The next is wisdom, like we touched on a little bit earlier, that she would speak wisdom and speak life into your life and build you up on the foundation, which is Jesus and not anybody else. The next is that she is clothed with dignity and with strength, that she knows her identity in the Lord and that the Lord is her firm foundation, and that the strength that she does have is not her own strength that comes from her own might, but instead it is the joy of the Lord that is her strength, and ultimately that propels her each and every single day. The next is preparation, that she prepares for the future and that she's able to go and take care of you and serve you well in the areas that you need to be served. But men, remember, this also goes the same for you. You have to make sure you're serving your wife and prepare in the way that she needs to be served so that you two are honoring one another. So men and women, don't think that this is just a one-way street. You both have to be able to serve one another. And listen, this is something I learned after I got married, but I'm a very selfish person, and so is my wife. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but when you get married, you're gonna realize how selfish you actually are. Whether it's there's some downtime and you wanna spend time doing what you wanna do and not what the other person wants to do, or whatever it may be. It's a very broad spectrum, but you're gonna realize how much you truly think about yourself and not necessarily others and other people and how you can serve them best. So women, look at the word and see how God calls women to live as a not only godly woman, but a godly spouse one day. If you do have intentions to get married to a godly man one day, and start setting up those principles now so that it's not something that you have to learn later, because I promise you, godly men and Christian men are looking for a Christian Proverbs 31 woman, and I promise you, if you do those things now, it's gonna be a lot easier and a lot better in your future relationship, knowing that you already have these foundations put in place. And secondly, it marks the maturity in the relationship of two believers. Why? Because you're living how God calls you to live, and you're honoring one another how God calls you to honor one another, so that you can be prepared for marriage, which is a beautiful and wonderful thing that is created by the Lord for you guys to worship Him and become one flesh. The fourth thing, men, this is so important for us, and then also women. The fourth thing that men are looking for in a Christian woman is somebody who is not gonna lead them into temptation. It's so important that you guys are constantly dying to yourself and denying your flesh and not acting on the fleshly desires that you guys have. Now, don't get me wrong. These desires are not inherently bad and inherently sinful. God did create man and woman to exist in harmony and to come together as one flesh to glorify God the Father. But the difficult part about this is those actions, those desires, those things are things meant only for marriage. These things that are intimate and beautiful are only meant for marriage because God wants to protect you and to protect your purity and your peace before you get married, because if you go out and you do these things before marriage with a bunch of people, it's just gonna lead to heartbreak. It's gonna lead to ties to multiple different people. And at the end of the day, it can be really hard to break through some of these struggles because of decisions that we made that maybe we regret. But this is one thing I don't want you to miss. If you've made a decision or a mistake when it comes to intimacy, whether it's sex before marriage or whatever it might be, whether it's lusting after men or lusting after women by whatever means, right? I mean, all of these things are things that God calls us not to do and that don't protect our purity. I want you to know that, number one, that there is forgiveness in Jesus Christ, that you are a new creation, you are made new, but number two, there is healing in Jesus Christ, and that even if these things are things that have happened in your past, you can actually not look at the past, but instead focus on the future with Jesus in your life and living how He calls you to live, and that there is healing in that area, and that you don't have to necessarily worry about those mistakes that you've made. They don't define you. They're not your identity, but you can grow past them and move into such a better way of living that Christ calls us to. But then the same goes for the men. Men, you have to make sure that you have self-control. This applies to the women and to the men. Self-control, you have to make sure that you are denying your flesh every single day with these desires, because you will have them. I'd be lying if you said you won't. You will have these desires. And the best thing that you can do is to deny your flesh, because in that you are honoring the other person more than you could ever think of, because you are protecting them and their heart for something that is meant strictly for marriage. So if you're a Christian man or if you're a Christian woman watching this video, remember these things, especially when it comes to protecting your heart, protecting your purity before marriage. Whether that's a mistake and you stumbled up already and asked for forgiveness, or it's something that you haven't yet, keep in mind that there is restoration, there's healing in Jesus, but also make a vow to yourself today to do that thing, to protect your purity and protect your heart, so that that is something only for the man or the woman that you will marry, and you can honor God through it. And the last thing that a Christian man looks for in a Christian woman and really wants is somebody who is going to submit to them. Now, I don't want people to take this wrong, right? And get this in this place where, oh, you just have to submit to everything your man says and yada, yada, yada. This also goes the same way with men. Men, it's important that sometimes that you are able to actually submit to your wife in areas that you are wrong and you do need help in, and places that it's most appropriate for you to submit to your wife in different situations and circumstances, which there's so many of those to go over, but I think this is the main thing that I want to leave you guys with here. The Bible calls the wife to submit to the man, and the man is called to be the head of the household. And I believe the Bible is 100% true, and I'm going to live how the Bible calls me to live. And so one thing that I think is super important that men and women do alike is that women, when you get into a relationship with a Christian man, when you guys get married, the Bible says that wives, you should submit to your husband. And so being in a place spiritually where you can willingly submit to your husband and know that he is the leader of the house and that I can trust him, that I know his intentions for my life and our family's life is good, and that he's going to do everything in his power to provide for this family, to take care of this family, and that ultimately it is my job to support him in that. That's one of the biggest things that Christian men are looking for, is somebody who is going to trust them, to submit to them, to build them up, to encourage them, and ultimately to lead them to Christ as well. But this is the one last thing I don't want to say. Women, it's not just your job to submit to the men. Men, it's also your job to submit to the women as well. Listen, sometimes there are going to be times where you don't know what is best, that you need to listen to the advice. Now, men, this also goes for you. Submission doesn't look like your wife just doing whatever you tell her to do, or your partner doing whatever you tell her to do. Submission, and true submission, looks like a man and a woman, a couple, coming together to Christ and submitting to Christ as authority in their life, together as a whole, and ultimately laying down their lives for him to live a life that's glorifying unto the Lord. And sometimes, men, you have to swallow your pride and listen to the things that your wife or somebody in your relationship is trying to tell you, because you have to also be able to trust them. You have to be able to know that they have the best intention for your life. And at the end of the day, they're not just trying to call things out in your life just to throw you under the bus, but instead because they are submitted to God, and they may notice things in your life or decisions you make or whatever that actually might not be the best, but instead can give you insight because they're following the Lord, and you guys can talk those things together. So I don't want submission to sound like, oh, it's just a thing that the women have to do, or it's just a thing that the men have to do. You two together have to submit towards Christ so that the man can lead the family the best as possible, and the woman can complement the man as best as possible in every situation and circumstance, so that you can honor the Lord, have a healthy relationship that glorifies the Lord, and ultimately have a long-lasting relationship and marriage that points to Jesus. So you guys, if you guys made it this far, subscribe to the channel if you're new and you haven't been here. Comment down some questions you might have below. I know some of these things are hard to talk about and difficult to discuss, but these are things that Christian men look for in Christian women, and I hope this helps men and women alike who are Christians, who are trying to pursue somebody for marriage, and hopefully glorify the Lord in it. So I love you guys, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.